spaceships, star maps, the void, and Todd Howard. These are the few things that will be coming in the near future for the space games in 2023, and even some before that. Come with me and take a look at the few upcoming space game titles that could be, well, potentially rather inviting going forward. Oh, and if you enjoy these compilations, do support my work on Patreon, links down below. Of course, we'll be starting with Starfield. After Xbox Game Pass showcase, we finally got a real glimpse into actual gameplay, not just a pre-cut bullshit cinematic trailer or boring concept art with Mr. Howard telling us sweet, sweet lies as the song goes. Now, if you're interested about this in greater detail, I did a whole analysis about the trailer, so go check that video out. But basically, Starfield immediately resembles a more realistic No Man's Sky, and I'm not the only one making that comparison. But does that mean it's a bad thing to copy? Well, not necessarily, of course, though I will withhold my judgment before I got the chance to actually play it, and then I'll see whether or not Bethesda has ruined Starfield's promising premise like with Fallout 76, their last, well, what could only be described as a worm-infested liquidized fart spray, or will Starfield be as good as it's looking right now? It certainly will be interesting to see whether or not Starfield will manage to do what No Man's Sky did and break into the space sim genre by force. Or will it be just a Fallout Skyrim with space dress up? But just in case you missed all the news, here's what we can expect from Starfield. First things first, yes, you will be able to pilot a ship. Hell, even build it. Yes, you can walk inside of it as well. Elite fucking Odyssey, damn it. Then you have some basic material gathering and FPS pew-pews to enjoy, which leads us to crafting and then base building as well. The ability to land anywhere on any of the planets frankly should not really be celebrated but expected, but hey, coming from Bethesda, the corner-cutting machine of the century, you almost think that should be celebrated. Still, overall I personally am disgusted by the visual art style they chose for everything. I just simply hate it, but hell, maybe the gameplay could really be so good that it turns me around. In either which case, with a strict eye, I shall be watching you, Starfield. Do not fuck up. The game itself is slated for early 2023 release after a delay. Now, the next upcoming game is Star Citizen. Yeah, it's still coming and it doesn't stop coming. Hopped in their money boats, they hit the ground running. Okay, fine. Sorry, I could not resist poking fun at it again. But if I can be serious for a moment. Those of you not familiar with Star Citizen understand. Over $400 million in funding over the last 10 years. That's been Star Citizen, and it's still not ready to release. Many question its validity and even the goals of its developers, so making these little jokes that border on Duke Nukem Forever level of unreleased or still in development is really all we can do to not cry ourselves to sleep. Now, we all want good games and released games, not just thinly veiled bullshit of a feature creep. Now, Star Citizen, of course, constantly releases updates and features, but stepping back and examining these said features and what they actually do and how important they are, at least I, as a critic, can get, frustrated. Yeah, I suppose frustrated would be a good word without going too far. Still, there's no date, not even hints of finishing either the Star Citizen or Squadron 42, the single-player version of it. We're all just still waiting. But hey, at least once in a while they do release those free weekends that anyone can load up and enjoy this hyper-poly PowerPoint presentation that they've made. Now then, going back to that Xbox Pass showcase, the Calisto project, the Dead Space that's not the Dead Space but made by the Dead Space former developers. Finally, we got a release date for it, and the 2nd December seems to be like a perfect time to make the most depressing month in the year even more depressing, but in a good way. It certainly will be interesting to see the return of space horror genre once more. Speaking of the Dead Space, the Remake 2 was announced a little while back, and while I was looking at the space games at the start of the year, to check out the compilation because it has way more games in it than what I'm covering today, at the time when I made it, the remake did not have a date. Well, 6 months later today, we got one, and it looks like it's slated for January 23rd next year. In that compilation I did also remark that it would be interesting to compare the Dead Space, the original, the Dead Space remake, and now the Calisto project as well. We'll actually see which one ends up as the space horror arms race victor. But wasting no time, let's move on to Everspace 2. The game launched in early access a little while back, and this year the team over at Rockfish is releasing updates for the game, fleshing it out with more stories and maps as well as other features, which slowly but surely is leading them to full game's release in early 2023. I have already remarked how Everspace 2 was already in early access when it released, good enough to be called a full game, compared at least to the rest of the crap that it tends to get released these days. So I admire Rockfish's efforts in putting in extra work, and actually you can check out the full roadmap yourselves, I'll link it down below. Then we have a smaller title of Flight of Nova, a physics-based spaceship landing kind of a simulator that showcased its demo on the Steam's Next Fest event earlier this year, and now it has launched in its early access, so do look it up if it interests you. But now for some sad news, unfortunately. Remember Starbase, that Finnish-developed voxel building crafting game with some FPS elements? Well, though it's still updating today, all is not as well as it seems. First off, for a while now, community has been annoyed by multitude of decisions that developers have made regarding gameplay, balance, as well as added features. Namely, as some would call it, missing the point of what would make the game good. This, in turn, has led to the following message from the developers at the end of April this year. We're pushing out a lot of content ahead of schedule for the next week or so. The reason for this rather sudden major update is that Starbase's sales performance hasn't been the strongest, and thus we need to prioritize other projects for some time in interest of ensuring the game's continued development and long-term future. Starbase's server costs are low, so they aren't in any danger, but its development will be slowed down and updates will be less frequent for some time. While this is not ideal, we're looking forward to returning to development as soon as possible, reinvigorated and ready to make Starbase the game we all want it to be. Well, many in the community already see this as a warning sign that the game is done or dying a slow death. And honestly, who can blame them? Really, have you often heard that developers come back to the game and restart its development in full and actually succeed? Well, sure, I kind of have with the PlanetSide 2, but PlanetSide 2 had a corporate backing. However, Frozen Byte is a small developer without said corporate backing. It really is kinda sad, because Starbase really felt kinda cool. I personally liked it well enough, I saw a decent potential in it, but then again, here we are. Now, as for the game's full release, well, do I need to spell it out for you? So how about we move on to a brighter note. One day I stumbled upon this rather interesting little project from a Polish developer called Moon Mystery. As the developer describes it, it's an Interstellar meets Firewatch. Well, overall it looks interesting, and though it's notably rough around the edges, I certainly would like to see where it goes. The game's release is planned for 2023, so we'll see when it comes out. So let me be a bit shameless here and say, subscribe to keep up with the news. Oh, and here's a little game that released already, but I did not cover it last time for the compilation. Nebulous Fleet Command. A simulation-heavy tactical space game? Well, at least that's how developers describe it themselves. Overall, it's in early access since February, and updates keep rolling in. It's pretty neat looking, old school looking game. And no wonder, because it's developed by quote-unquote Navy officer who makes a game about Space Navy. And finally, we close this off with a good old Kerbal Space Program 2. Finally, we got in, well, let's just say an estimate release period of early 2023. As for the game, well, it's Kerbal, just newer, better, stronger, and cooler. Or at least funnier. Poor Kerbal's been struggling a little for the past few years with the publisher shenanigans, but after all the hardship and fan anticipation, we'll finally see the Nebulous second game. Developers been talking about all manner of changes and details they want to put in the new game, which is good and all, but, well, frankly, I just want to see a new release because, frankly, as Space Simulator category goes, there really is no one else making anything beyond simplistic or low-budget programs. Kerbal has basically become the gateway drug for future engineers and kids of all ages to dabble into actual rocket science, promoting the field of study and education. So indeed, the best of luck to Kerbals. We'll see you in 2023. And with that, in all the big strokes, that's about all we can expect for the next year in regards to space-related games. Not a lot of them, but at least unlike some other genres, it's not filled with repetitive garbage. Now, of course, do let me know of the upcoming games that I perhaps could have missed. But make sure that they are not old garbage that I've already covered, but the future stuff. And I'll make sure to include it for the next time I make these sorts of compilations. But as always, if you enjoy these kinds of compilations, well, do check out the links down below for the Patreon or join YouTube members. For now though, that's it, so float on my Astro wannabes, float on and enjoy the 16 times the detail.